The medical bay of the Galactic Coalition ship Harmony's Edge hummed with the usual sounds of life support systems and monitoring equipment. Dr. Zephyra adjusted her forearms as she reviewed the latest patient files on her holographic display. As the ship's chief medical officer, she had seen many species recover from various ailments, but the human in Bed 7 had puzzled her for 3 standard months. Marcus Chun lay motionless on the bio bed, his dark hair grown long and unkempt, his once muscular frame now thin from months of intravenous nutrition. The monitoring devices showed normal brain activity, normal vital signs, yet he remained completely unresponsive to all external stimuli. The other medical staff had begun calling him the sleeping ghost in whispered conversations they thought she couldn't hear. What troubled Dr. Zephyra most wasn't the mystery of his condition, but the fragments of his military record that had arrived with him. The file was heavily redacted, showing only his name, rank as a Colonial Marine Sergeant, and a series of black bars where his service history should have been. The only clear entry was his final mission status: sole survivor, Kepler 442b incident. She approached his bed and ran another scan with her medical tricorder. The readings remained identical to yesterday, and the day before, and every day since he'd been brought aboard. Whatever had happened on Kepler, 442b had left Marcus physically unharmed but mentally unreachable, trapped somewhere behind closed eyes that occasionally moved during what appeared to be dreams. "Still nothing, Doctor?" asked Nurse Kellyan, a young Centaurian who had recently joined the medical staff. Her blue-scaled skin shimmered under the medical bay's bright lights as she checked the nutrient flow to Marcus's 4. "The same," Dr. Zephyra replied, her voice carrying the weight of professional frustration. "His neural pathways show activity consistent with someone who is awake and aware, yet he responds to nothing. No pain stimuli, no auditory responses, no reaction to light changes. It's as if his mind has simply withdrawn." Kellyan glanced at the human with sympathy. Despite being from a species known for their emotional distance, she had developed a soft spot for the mysterious patient. "Has anyone tried talking to him? I mean, really talking, not just medical questions." Dr. Zephyra's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of thoughtful consideration among her people. The psychological staff attempted standard therapy protocols when he first arrived. No response. "Why do you ask?" "My grandmother used to tell stories about warriors who survived great battles," Kellyan said softly, adjusting Marcus's blanket with careful hands. "She said sometimes their spirits would hide so deep inside that only the right voice could call them back. Maybe he just hasn't heard the right voice yet." The doctor made a note in her personal log about Kellyan's suggestion. It wasn't medical science, but after 3 months of medical science failing, perhaps it was time to consider other approaches. Later that evening, during the ship's night cycle, Dr. Zephyra returned to the medical bay for her final rounds. The lights had been dimmed to simulate natural circadian rhythms, and the usual bustle of daytime medical activity had given way to the quiet monitoring of sleeping patients. Marcus lay exactly as she had left him, though she noticed his eyes were moving more rapidly beneath his closed lids. She pulled up a chair beside his bed and activated her personal recording device. If she was going to try Kellyan's suggestion, she might as well document it properly. "Marcus," she said aloud, feeling somewhat foolish but determined to be thorough. "My name is Dr. Zephyra. I've been taking care of you for 93 standard days now. I don't know if you can hear me, but I wanted you to know that you're safe aboard the Coalition vessel Harmony's Edge." She paused, watching his face for any change. "Nothing. According to your records, you're a Colonial Marine. I've met several humans from your military over the years. They speak very highly of your species' determination and courage. Whatever happened to you on Kepler 442b, you survived it. That says something about your strength." A slight change in his breathing pattern caught her attention. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but her medical training had taught her to observe the smallest details. She leaned forward, speaking more directly to him. "I don't know what you've seen or what you've endured, but you're not there anymore. You're here, with people who want to help you. Your body is healing, Marcus. Perhaps it's time to let your mind heal as well. This time, there was no mistaking it. His breathing had definitely changed, becoming slightly more rapid. Dr. Zephyra quickly ran a scan, noting elevated stress indicators in his neural activity. Something was happening. Marcus, I'm going to ask you to do something very simple. If you can hear me, if you understand what I'm saying, try to move one finger. Just one finger. That's all. She watched his hands intently. Seconds passed. Then, almost imperceptibly, the index finger of his right hand twitched. Dr. Zephyra nearly dropped her scanner in surprise. After 3 months of complete unresponsiveness, this tiny movement represented a breakthrough she hadn't dared to hope for. She immediately began documenting everything, her 4 hands working efficiently across multiple devices. Excellent, Marcus. That was very good. Can you do it again? Another twitch, this one more deliberate. Outstanding. Now, I'm going to ask you something more difficult. I want you to try to open your eyes. Take your time. There's no rush. For several minutes, nothing happened. Dr. Zephyra waited patiently, occasionally offering words of encouragement. Just as she was beginning to think she had pushed too far too fast, Marcus's eyelids began to flutter. The process was slow and clearly difficult for him. His eyes opened only a fraction at first, then closed again as if the effort was too much. Dr. Zephyra quickly dimmed the medical bay lights further and spoke in a softer voice. The lights are dim now. Try again when you're ready. This time his eyes opened and stayed open. They were brown, she noted, with an intensity that seemed to look right through her. But there was something else there too, a haunted quality that spoke of experiences no person should have to endure. Hello, Marcus, she said gently. My name is Dr. Zephyra. You're safe now. His lips moved, but no sound came out. She could see him struggling to speak, his throat probably dry from months of silence. Don't try to talk yet. Let me get you some water. She prepared a small cup with a straw and held it to his lips. He managed a few small sips before turning his head away. When he looked at her again, there was more awareness in his eyes. He seemed to be taking in his surroundings, processing the fact that he was in a medical facility rather than wherever his mind had been trapped. Do you know where you are? Dr. Zephyra asked. Marcus's voice came out as barely a whisper, rough from disuse. Not Kepler. No, not Kepler. You're aboard a coalition medical ship. You've been here for 3 months. Do you remember what happened? His eyes closed tightly, and she could see his jaw clench. When he opened them again, there was pain there that went far beyond physical discomfort. They're all dead, he whispered. All of them. Who, Marcus? Who is dead? My squad. My responsibility. His voice broke slightly on the last word. Dr. Zephyr set down her medical equipment and focused entirely on the human in front of her. She had seen combat trauma before, but something about Marcus's case felt different. The depth of his withdrawal suggested something far beyond a typical traumatic stress response. Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever happened on Kepler, 442b, whatever you think you could have done differently, the fact that you survived means something. Your squad would want you to live. He stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him processing her words. Finally, he spoke again, his voice slightly stronger. You don't understand. I didn't just survive. I became something else, something they would have been ashamed of. Before Dr. Zephyra could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The emergency lighting activated, bathing the medical bay in red warning lights. Through the communication system, the captain's voice echoed urgently. All hands to emergency stations. We have detected an unknown vessel approaching at high speed. All medical personnel prepare for potential casualties. Dr. Zephyra looked at Marcus, torn between her duty to respond to the emergency and her concern for her newly awakened patient. Go, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. I'll be here when you get back. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I'll send Kelly in to stay with you. Don't try to get up yet. Your muscles need time to remember how to work properly. As she rushed to prepare the medical bay for emergency protocols. Dr. Zephyra couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's awakening at this particular moment was more than just coincidence. Something in his eyes when the alarm started suggested that whatever had happened on Kepler 442b, it might not be over yet. The unknown ship continued its approach, and throughout the Harmony's edge, Coalition personnel prepared for whatever was coming. In the medical bay, Marcus Chun lay awake for the first time in 3 months, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of a ship preparing for potential battle. His hands clenched into fists beneath the sheets as memories began forcing their way back to the surface. Kepler 442b, the research station, the screaming, the moment when Marcus Chun had died and something else had taken his place. Something his squad had nicknamed the Reaper in their final, terrified moments. As if summoned by his thoughts, the lights in the medical bay flickered, and Marcus felt the familiar cold sensation begin to spread through his chest. After 3 months of silence, the thing inside him was waking up too. The approaching ship was about to discover that the Harmony's edge carried more than just Coalition personnel and medical supplies. It carried humanity's darkest secret, wrapped in the form of a broken Marine who had tried so hard to stay asleep that he had forgotten how to be human. But now Marcus was awake, and the universe was about to remember why some things were better left buried on dead worlds like Kepler 442b. Through the medical bay's viewport, the unknown vessel grew larger against the stars, and Marcus Chun closed his eyes and prepared to become the Reaper once more. The bridge of the Harmony's edge buzzed with tense activity as Captain Thorne studied the tactical display. The approaching vessel was unlike anything in the Coalition database, sleek, predatory, and moving with a speed that defied conventional physics. Its hull was a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it difficult to get accurate sensor readings. "Distance to contact?" Captain Thorne asked, his voice steady despite the obvious tension in the room. 60,000 kilometers and closing, reported Lieutenant Vex from the sensor station. Still no response to our hails. Their trajectory suggests they're not planning to stop. Weapon status? Defensive systems online, but Captain. Vex hesitated, her blue skin darkening with concern. This ship's design suggests it's built for medical missions, not combat. Our weapons are primarily designed to clear debris or disable pirates, not face whatever that thing is. Captain Thorne nodded grimly. The Harmony's edge was indeed a medical vessel, part of the Coalition's humanitarian fleet. They carried supplies to remote colonies, provided emergency medical assistance, and transported patients to major medical facilities. They were not equipped for serious combat. "Sir," came the voice of communications officer Rendau, "I'm picking up something strange from our medical bay. There's some kind of energy signature building down there." "Energy signature? What kind?" "I don't know, sir. It's unlike anything in our database. It's coming from Deck 7, Section C." Captain Thorne frowned. That was where they kept their long-term patients, including the mysterious human who had been comatose for 3 months. "Contact Dr. Zephyra. Ask her what's happening in medical." But before Rendau could open the communication channel, every screen on the bridge flickered and displayed the same message in multiple languages: return the Reaper or face extinction. The bridge fell silent. Captain Thorne felt a chill run down his spine as he read the words. The Reaper? What do they mean by that? In the medical bay, Dr. Zephyra was experiencing her own crisis. The energy readings from Marcus's biobed were off the charts, yet he appeared to be lying calmly with his eyes closed. Kellyanne stood nearby, her scales shifting to a nervous purple as she monitored the increasingly erratic medical equipment. "Doctor, should I sedate him?" Kellyanne asked, watching the displays with growing alarm. "No," Dr. Zephyra replied, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Something told her that sedating Marcus right now would be a very bad idea. "Marcus, can you hear me? What's happening to you?" Marcus opened his eyes, and Dr. Zephyra took an involuntary step backward. His brown eyes now held flecks of silver that seemed to move like liquid metal. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. They found me, he said simply. I should have known they would never stop looking. Who found you? Marcus, you need to tell me what's going on. He sat up in bed with fluid motion that seemed impossible for someone who had been comatose for months. The medical monitoring equipment sparked and went dead as he moved, overwhelmed by whatever energy was radiating from his body. My name is Marcus Chun, he said, standing despite Dr. Zephyr's protests. But on Kepler 442b, I became something else. Something that should have died with the rest of my squad. Marcus, you're not well. You need to lie down and let us help you. He looked at her with those strange, silver-flecked eyes, and for a moment she saw genuine regret there. You've been kind to me, Dr. Zephyra, both you and Kellyanne. I'm sorry for what's about to happen. What's about to happen? Marcus, talk to me. The ship that's approaching, they're called the Devourers. They consume other species, absorbing their knowledge, their abilities, their very essence. 3 months ago, they attacked the research station on Kepler 442b, where my squad was providing security. The lights in the medical bay dimmed as Marcus began to change. His skin took on a pale, almost luminescent quality, and the air around him shimmered with barely visible energy. We fought them as long as we could, Marcus continued, his voice becoming more distant. But they were too strong, too many. One by one, my squad fell. Rodriguez, the explosives expert who always made us laugh. Patterson, our sniper who never missed a shot. Chun, our medic who could fix anyone. Williams, our tech specialist who could hack anything. Dr. Zephyra noticed he had referred to Chun as if it were someone else, even though that was his own surname. By the time I was the last one alive, I was ready to die with them. But the research station housed more than just scientific equipment. Deep in the lower levels was something the Coalition had been studying in secret, something they had found on a dead world in the Outer Rim. The temperature in the medical bay began to drop, and frost started forming on the windows. What did you find, Marcus? We called it the Void Stone, a piece of crystallized darkness that seemed to absorb everything around it. Light, heat, life itself. The researchers thought they could harness its power as a weapon. They were wrong. Marcus looked at his hands, which were now glowing with a soft, cold light. When the Devourers breached the lower levels, the Void Stone reacted to my desperation. It reached out to me, offered me the power to save my squad. All I had to do was accept it into myself. But it was too late to save them, Dr. Zephyr said quietly, beginning to understand. Yes, by the time the transformation was complete, they were already dead. But I had become something new, something that could fight the Devourers on their own terms, something that could consume them the way they consumed others. The medical bay doors slid open, and Captain Thorne entered with 2 security officers. He stopped short when he saw Marcus standing in the center of the room, surrounded by an aura of cold energy. Are you the one they call the Reaper? Captain Thorne asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. Marcus nodded slowly. On Kepler 442b, I killed every single Devourer that had invaded the station. I absorbed their knowledge, their technology, their hunger. I became something that could hunt them across the galaxy. That's why they're here. They want to reclaim what I took from them. And if we don't hand you over, they'll destroy this entire ship and everyone on it. Then, they'll continue hunting me until they find me again. The Devourers don't give up, and they don't show mercy. Captain Thorne looked at Dr. Zephyra, who shook her head firmly. Captain, I won't allow you to hand over a patient to these creatures, regardless of who or what he's become. Doctor, I appreciate your medical ethics, but I have 400 souls aboard this ship to consider. Then, let me go to them willingly, Marcus said. Once I'm off the ship, you can escape. Get word to the Coalition about what you've learned here. Absolutely not, Dr. Zephyr said firmly. I don't care what you become, Marcus. You're still my patient, and I don't abandon my patients. Before anyone could respond, the ship shook violently as the Devourer vessel opened fire. Emergency klaxons wailed, and the lights flickered as the ship's shields absorbed the impact. Sir, came Rendell's voice over the intercom. They're demanding an immediate response. They're charging weapons for another strike. Marcus closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the silver had completely overtaken the brown. When he spoke, his voice carried an otherworldly resonance that made everyone in the room feel cold. I spent 3 months trying to forget what I had become, trying to hide from the hunger, the need to consume and destroy. But they found me anyway. He turned to Dr. Zephyra. You asked what happened on Kepler 442b. I killed the Devourers, yes. But in doing so, I became something just as monstrous. The Void Stone didn't just give me power. It gave me an endless hunger for the life force of others. That's what the Devourers feed on, and now it's what I feed on too. Marcus, you don't have to be what the stone made you. You can choose to be something else. He smiled sadly. I've been trying to make that choice for 3 months. But some things can't be changed, only controlled. The ship shook again, more violently this time. Through the medical bay's viewport, they could see the Devourer ship moving closer, its dark hull bristling with weapons that seemed to bend space around them. I have to go to them, Marcus said. But not as their prisoner. I'm going to finish what I started on Kepler 442b. Marcus, wait, Dr. Zephyr called, but he was already moving toward the door. Keep the ship moving, he told Captain Thorne. No matter what happens, don't stop to help me. Get these people to safety. As Marcus left the medical bay, the cold energy that had been building around him began to spread through the ship's corridors. Emergency systems activated as the temperature dropped and lights flickered. Whatever Marcus had become, his very presence was affecting the ship's systems. Captain Thorne activated his communicator. All hands, this is the captain. We have a passenger who is about to attempt something extremely dangerous. All personnel are to remain at their stations and prepare for emergency procedures. In the hangar bay, Marcus stood before the emergency airlocks, no longer looking entirely human. His skin had taken on the pale, luminescent quality of starlight, and the air around him crackled with visible energy. The Void Stone's power was fully awakened now, and with it came memories of every devourer he had consumed on Kepler 442b. He could feel them out there, aboard their ship, waiting for him. They thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy, but they were about to learn that humanity had a way of becoming whatever was necessary to survive. Marcus sealed his environmental suit and opened the airlock. As he stepped into space, the cold vacuum felt warm compared to the ice that flowed through his veins. Behind him, the Harmony's edge began to pull away, following his instructions to escape. Ahead of him, the Devourer's ship waited like a sleeping beast. Marcus activated his suit's thrusters and began the journey toward what would either be his redemption or his final transformation into the monster he had been trying so hard not to become. Marcus drifted through the vacuum of space toward the Devourer's ship, his modified physiology allowing him to survive without life support systems that would have been necessary for any normal human. The Void Stone's power coursed through him, making the cold of space feel like a gentle breeze. As he approached the alien vessel, he could sense the creatures within, their hunger radiating outward like heat from a furnace. The ship itself was a work of terrifying beauty. Its hull seemed to absorb light, creating the illusion that it was a hole cut into space itself. Organic curves mixed with technological elements, suggesting that the Devourers had long ago merged biology with machinery. Sensor arrays that looked like compound eyes tracked his approach, and weapon ports that resembled feeding mouths followed his movements. As Marcus neared the hull, a section opened like a wound healing in reverse. The opening revealed an airlock chamber filled with the same dark metal as the ship's exterior. He had expected them to simply destroy him in space, but apparently they wanted to face him directly. The moment he crossed the threshold, the airlock sealed behind him. Atmosphere rushed in, but it carried a strange, sweet scent that would have been poisonous to most species. Marcus breathed it in without concern. Whatever humanity had been, the Void Stone had changed him into something that could adapt to almost any environment. The inner door opened, revealing a corridor that pulsed with bioluminescent veins running along the walls. The lighting was dim and red, creating shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Marcus could hear the ship itself breathing, a slow, rhythmic sound that came from the walls around him. "Welcome back, Little Reaper," came a voice that seemed to originate from the walls themselves. It spoke in perfect English, though the accent was strange, as if the speaker was tasting each word before saying it. "I'm not your little anything," Marcus replied, walking deeper into the ship. His footsteps echoed strangely in the organic corridor, each sound seeming to travel further than it should. "Oh, but you are. You carry our essence within you now. When you consumed our warriors on Kepler 442b, you became part of the collective. We have been calling to you across the void, waiting for you to remember what you truly are." The corridor opened into a vast chamber that defied the ship's external dimensions. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, covered in bioluminescent patterns that resembled neural networks. At the center of the space stood a creature that was unmistakably the ship's leader. The Devourer was tall and elegant, standing nearly 3 meters in height. Its skin was the same light-absorbing black as the ship's hull, but it shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. For arms extended from its torso, each ending in hands that featured too many fingers. Its face was almost human in its basic structure, but the eyes were solid black orbs that reflected no light, and its mouth was filled with rows of crystalline teeth. "I am Nexus Prime," the creature said, its voice now coming from its physical form rather than the walls. "I was there when your species first crawled from the mud of your homeworld. I was there when you discovered fire, when you built your first cities, when you reached for the stars. I have been waiting for you to evolve into something worthy of our attention." "Funny," Marcus said, stopping about 10 meters from the creature. "I was on Kepler 442b when your people murdered my squad. I don't remember them being interested in evolution, just consumption." Nexus Prime's head tilted to one side, a gesture that was eerily human despite the alien features. "Your squad served their purpose. Through their deaths, you were driven to accept the Void Stone's gift. Without that desperation, that willingness to sacrifice everything for power, you would never have become what you are now." Marcus felt the cold anger that had sustained him for 3 months begin to build again. "You killed them to force my transformation. We guided events to their proper conclusion. Your species has always had potential, but you clung to weakness. Compassion, mercy, these things prevent true evolution. The Void Stone burned those weaknesses out of you, leaving only the purity of hunger and purpose." The chamber around them began to pulse with energy, and Marcus realized there were other devourers present. They emerged from alcoves in the walls, dozens of them, all watching the confrontation with those terrible black eyes. Some were similar to Nexus Prime, while others showed variations, different heights, additional limbs, features that suggested they had consumed and absorbed characteristics from countless species. "You see," Nexus Prime gestured to his followers, "we are perfection. Each of us has consumed thousands of beings, taking their strengths while discarding their weaknesses. We are evolution itself, and now you can join us in guiding the galaxy toward its ultimate destiny." Marcus looked around at the assembled creatures and felt the Void Stone's hunger respond to their presence. Part of him wanted to unleash its power, to consume them all and add their abilities to his own. But another part, the part that Dr. Zephyra had helped awaken, remembered what he had been before Kepler 442b. "You're wrong about one thing," Marcus said quietly. "The Void Stone didn't burn my humanity out of me. It's still there, and it's what makes me different from you." Nexus Prime laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Humanity? That collection of sentiments and attachments that makes your species weak? You consumed my warriors, Little Reaper. You felt the ecstasy of absolute power. You know the truth now. Compassion is just another word for failure to act." "No," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "Compassion is what makes power meaningful. My squad didn't die because they were weak. They died because they were willing to sacrifice themselves for something greater than their own survival. The temperature in the chamber began to drop as Marcus allowed his power to manifest. Frost formed on the organic walls, and the bioluminescent patterns flickered as the cold interfered with their biological processes. You want to know what I learned on Kepler 442b? Marcus continued, his eyes now completely silver. I learned that there's something worse than dying for your friends. It's surviving when they don't, and forgetting why their sacrifice mattered. Nexus Prime's expression shifted from amusement to concern as the cold continued to spread. You cannot fight us all, Reaper. We are Legion. We are eternal. Maybe not, Marcus admitted. But I don't have to win. I just have to make sure you remember that humanity doesn't give up, even when we should. The battle began without warning. Nexus Prime moved with inhuman speed, crossing the distance between them in an instant. But Marcus was ready. The Void Stone's power erupted from him in a wave of absolute cold that froze the air itself. Nexus Prime's attack stopped short as ice crystals formed on his dark skin. The other Devourers rushed forward, but Marcus was no longer the broken Marine who had hidden in sleep for 3 months. He was something new, something that combined human determination with cosmic power. He moved through their ranks like a force of nature, each touch draining their life force and adding it to his own growing strength. But there were so many of them, and each one he consumed made the hunger stronger. Marcus could feel himself changing, becoming more like them with every life he took. The cold, calculating part of his mind whispered that this was evolution, that becoming a perfect predator was simply the next step in human development. Then he heard something that made him stop, a voice calling his name over the ship's communication system. Marcus, this is Dr. Zephyra. If you can hear me, I want you to know that the Harmony's edge is not leaving. We're staying right here until you come back. He looked up at the speakers embedded in the organic walls, momentarily distracted from the battle raging around him. Doctor, you have to leave. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is, came her voice, calm and determined despite the obvious danger. You're my patient, and I don't abandon my patients. Kellyanne wanted me to tell you something. She said her grandmother told her that warriors who lose their way can always find it again, as long as someone keeps calling their name. Nexus Prime, wounded but not defeated, rose from where he had fallen. Touching, but misguided. You are one of us now, Reaper. Their voices cannot reach you across the void you have become. Marcus looked at the Devourer leader, then at the dozens of other creatures surrounding him. Many were dead or dying, drained by his power, but more kept coming. The hunger inside him screamed to finish what he had started, to consume them all and claim their ship as his own. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone present, including himself. He knelt down beside one of the fallen Devourers and placed his hand gently on its forehead. Instead of draining its remaining life force, he pushed some of his own energy into it, stabilizing its condition. What are you doing? Nexus Prime demanded, genuine confusion in his voice. Something you'll never understand, Marcus replied, moving to another fallen enemy and repeating the process. I'm choosing what kind of monster I want to be. The surviving Devourers watched in fascination and horror as Marcus systematically saved the lives of their fallen comrades. With each act of mercy, the silver in his eyes faded slightly, replaced by flecks of their original brown. This is impossible, Nexus Prime whispered. The Void Stone does not permit such weakness. It feeds on death, on consumption, on the strong devouring the weak. Marcus stood up, having stabilized the last of the fallen enemies. Around him, the Devourers he had saved looked at him with expressions of complete bewilderment. Maybe that's because I'm not using just the Void Stone anymore, Marcus said. I'm using something else. Something human. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of the ship's breathing. In that silence, Dr. Zephyra's voice came again over the speakers. Marcus, whatever you're doing in there, I can see the ship's energy signature changing. The Harmony's edge sensors are showing massive fluctuations. Are you all right? Marcus smiled, and For the first time since Kepler 442b, it was a genuine human expression. "I'm better than I've been in a long time, Doctor. And I think I know how to end this without anyone else dying." He turned to face Nexus Prime, who had backed away during Marcus's unexpected display of mercy. "You want to evolve? You want to become perfect? Then let me show you what my species discovered long before we ever left our homeworld." "And what is that?" Nexus Prime asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "We discovered that the strongest survive not by consuming everything around them, but by protecting it. That's what evolution really means, becoming something that makes the universe better, not emptier." The conversation was interrupted by an explosion somewhere else in the ship. Through the chamber's viewing ports, they could see Coalition vessels approaching rapidly, led by a ship that Marcus recognized as a military dreadnought. "The cavalry arrives," Marcus said with satisfaction. "Dr. Zephyra must have sent out a distress call before following me here." Nexus Prime's expression was one of pure rage. "You have doomed us all, Reaper. The Coalition will destroy this ship, and everyone aboard it." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Marcus replied. He activated his suit's communicator and opened a channel to the approaching Coalition fleet. "This is Sergeant Marcus Chun aboard the Devourer vessel. I'm requesting permission to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this situation." The response from the Coalition fleet came through Admiral Sarah Voss, whose reputation for both tactical brilliance and unwavering moral principles was known throughout human space. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades protecting humanity's interests while maintaining its values. "Sergeant Chun, this is Admiral Voss aboard the Retribution. Are you being held against your will?" Marcus looked around the chamber at the assembled Devourers, many of whom were still recovering from their earlier battle. Nexus Prime stood motionless, apparently waiting to see how this unexpected development would unfold. "Negative, Admiral. I came aboard this vessel voluntarily to resolve a situation that began on Kepler 442b. I'm requesting permission to facilitate negotiations between the Coalition and these beings. Sergeant, our intelligence indicates that the creatures aboard that ship are responsible for the destruction of multiple colonies and research facilities. They are considered hostile entities. With respect, Admiral, the situation is more complex than our intelligence suggests. I believe there's a way to resolve this conflict without further bloodshed on either side." There was a pause, during which Marcus could imagine Admiral Voss consulting with her staff and reviewing whatever classified information they had about the Devourers. Finally, her voice returned. "Sergeant, I'm told that you've been missing for 3 months and were found in a catatonic state aboard the Harmony's Edge. Are you certain you're capable of making rational judgments about this situation?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Admiral, 3 months ago, I would have agreed with you. But I've learned some things about myself and about these creatures that I think you need to know." Nexus Prime stepped forward, his black eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression that mixed curiosity with suspicion. "You would negotiate for us? After we orchestrated the deaths of your squad?" "I'm not negotiating for you," Marcus replied. "I'm negotiating for the thousands of beings who will die if this fleet opens fire on your ship. Your people, my people, and everyone caught in between." Dr. Zephyr's voice came through the ship's speakers again. "Marcus, Admiral Voss is requesting to speak with me about your condition. Should I tell her about the Void Stone?" Marcus considered the question carefully. The existence of the Void Stone and its effects would certainly complicate any negotiations, but concealing it would likely make things worse in the long run. "Tell her everything, Doctor. The Admiral needs to understand what we're really dealing with here." Over the next several minutes, Marcus listened as Dr. Zephyra provided a medical briefing to Admiral Voss about his condition, the energy readings they had detected, and his apparent transformation. When she finished, the silence from the Coalition fleet stretched on long enough that Marcus began to wonder if they were simply preparing to open fire. Finally, Admiral Voss spoke again. "Sergeant Chun, based on Dr. Zephyr's report, it appears you've undergone some form of alien modification. Are you still human?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked at his hands, which still carried the pale luminescence of the Voidstone's power. Then, at the devourers around him who waited to hear his answer. I don't know, Admiral. I'm something different than what I was before Kepler, 442b. But I still remember what it means to be human, and I still believe in the principles my squad died defending. And what principles are those, Sergeant? That strength should be used to protect the weak, not consume them. That diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. That our differences are something to celebrate, not eliminate. Nexus Prime's laugh was bitter. Pretty words, Little Reaper. But you consume my warriors. You felt the ecstasy of absolute power. How can you speak of protection when you know the joy of predation? Marcus turned to face the Devourer leader directly. Because I also know the pain of loss. When I consumed your warriors, I didn't just take their power. I experienced their memories, their emotions, their regrets. Do you want to know what I found? Enlighten me. I found that every single one of them had once been something else. They weren't born as devourers. They were transformed, just like I was. And deep inside each of them, buried under layers of hunger and predatory instinct, were the remnants of what they used to be. The chamber fell silent. Several of the devourers exchanged glances, and Marcus could see uncertainty in their expressions for the first time. That's impossible, Nexus Prime said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Is it? When did you last think about the first species you consumed? When did you last remember what you were before you became what you are now? Nexus Prime's silence was answer enough. Marcus activated his communicator again. Admiral, I'm going to share some information with you that might change how we approach this situation. The Devourers aren't a single species. They're a collection of beings who have been transformed by exposure to substances similar to what affected me on Kepler, 442b. Are you saying they're victims of some kind of alien technology? I'm saying they're victims of their own evolution. They've become so focused on consumption and power that they've forgotten what they originally were. But I think there might be a way to help them remember. Dr. Zephyr's voice came through the speakers again. Marcus, if what you're suggesting is true, it would represent the largest medical and psychological rehabilitation challenge in galactic history. The resources required would be enormous. But possible? Marcus asked. Theoretically, yes. If we could find a way to reverse or modify the transformation process, it might be possible to help them recover some of their original identities. Admiral Voss rejoined the conversation. Sergeant, are you proposing that the Coalition attempt to rehabilitate a species that has been responsible for countless deaths across the galaxy? Admiral, I'm proposing that we do what humans do best. Find a solution that everyone said was impossible. Marcus turned back to Nexus Prime, whose expression had shifted from confident superiority to something approaching uncertainty. I felt what your warriors used to be before they became devourers. One of them was a poet. Another was a parent. One was a teacher who loved helping young minds grow. They're all still in there, buried under the hunger. The question is whether you're brave enough to let them come back. And if we refuse, Nexus Prime asked, then you'll face the Coalition fleet in battle, and everyone in this chamber will likely die. Your ship will be destroyed, and the cycle of violence will continue with the next group of devourers who come looking for revenge. And if we accept your proposal, then we work together to find a way to help you remember who you used to be. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it might be the first step toward becoming something better than what you are now. One of the other devourers, smaller and more humanoid than Nexus Prime, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice carried a musical quality that seemed oddly familiar. I remember singing, it said hesitantly. There was a time when I made music instead of consuming life. I haven't thought about that in how long has it been? Memories are the first step, Marcus said gently. The more you remember, the more of your original self you can recover. Nexus Prime looked around at his followers, many of whom were now staring at their hands or touching their faces as if seeing themselves for the first time in centuries. This is madness. We are predators. We are perfection. No, said the musical-voiced devourer. "We are lost. We have been lost for so long that we forgot what it felt like to be found." The tension in the chamber was building toward a breaking point. Marcus could sense that Nexus Prime was on the verge of either accepting the proposal or ordering an attack on the Coalition fleet. The decision would determine not just the fate of everyone present, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and one of the galaxy's most feared species. "Admiral Voss," Marcus said into his communicator, "I need you to make me a promise. If the Devourers agree to rehabilitation attempts, can you guarantee they'll be treated with dignity and respect, not as prisoners or experimental subjects?" "Sergeant, that's a significant commitment to make on behalf of the entire Coalition." "Admiral, with respect, this is bigger than Coalition policy. This is about what kind of species we want to be when we're the ones with the power to choose." Another long pause followed. When Admiral Voss spoke again, her voice carried the weight of a decision that would echo through history. "Sergeant Chun, if these beings agree to voluntary rehabilitation and demonstrate good faith in that process, I will personally guarantee that they will be treated according to Coalition humanitarian standards. They will be patients, not prisoners." Marcus looked at Nexus Prime. "You heard her. The choice is yours, but you need to make it now. The fleet won't wait forever." Nexus Prime stood motionless for what seemed like an eternity, his black eyes reflecting the bioluminescent patterns on the chamber walls. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What guarantee do we have that you won't simply use this as an opportunity to study us and find more efficient ways to destroy us?" "You don't," Marcus admitted. "Just like we don't have any guarantee that this isn't an elaborate trap to get close to Coalition facilities. Sometimes trust is a choice you make despite the risks, not because of the guarantees." The Devourer leader looked around at his followers once more, seeing them with new eyes as they struggled with returning memories of who they used to be. When he turned back to Marcus, something had changed in his expression. "Very well, Reaper. We will attempt this rehabilitation. But understand that if this proves to be deception or betrayal, the consequences will be severe." Marcus nodded solemnly. "Understood. And Nexus Prime? My name is Marcus Chun. The Reaper was what I became when I forgot how to be human. I'm trying to remember now, and I hope you can too." As if summoned by his words, the bioluminescent patterns on the walls began to shift and change, forming new configurations that pulsed in rhythm with something that almost sounded like a heartbeat. The ship itself seemed to be responding to the decision its inhabitants had made, transforming from a vessel of predation into something that might, with time and effort, become a home for beings learning to be themselves again. 6 months after the encounter in deep space, the Coalition medical facility on Meridian Station had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. What had once been a standard research hospital now housed the largest cross-species rehabilitation program ever attempted. The facility buzzed with activity as doctors, psychologists, anthropologists, and specialists from dozens of Coalition member species worked alongside their most unusual patients. Marcus Chun walked through the facility's main corridor, no longer looking like the pale, luminescent figure he had been aboard the Devourer's ship. The Voidstone's power still flowed through him, but months of working with Dr. Zephyra and her team had helped him learn to control and direct it rather than be controlled by it. His eyes still carried flecks of silver, but they were warm now rather than cold, and his smile was genuine rather than the predatory expression he had worn during his darkest moments. He paused outside one of the rehabilitation rooms and looked through the transparent aluminum window. Inside, the being who had once called himself Nexus Prime sat at a table covered with what appeared to be musical instruments from a dozen different worlds. The former Devourer leader had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of any of the patients. As memories of his original identity had returned, they had learned that his name was Kalen, and he had been a composer and music theorist from a species called the Resonari. His people had been among the first consumed by the early Devourers nearly 1,000 years ago. Now, slowly and carefully, He was learning to create music again instead of consuming life. The melodies he produced were hauntingly beautiful, but carried an undertone of profound sadness. The sound of someone mourning not just for what he had lost, but for the countless lives he had taken while forgetting who he truly was. Marcus entered the room quietly, not wanting to interrupt the creative process. Kalen looked up from the instrument he had been playing, something that resembled a cross between a piano and a harp, and nodded in greeting. "Marcus, how are the others progressing today?" It had taken months for Kalen to stop calling him Reaper, and even now, there were moments when the old predatory instincts seemed to surface. But those moments were becoming less frequent as his original personality reasserted itself. "Lyra is making remarkable progress," Marcus reported. "She's been working with the xenobiologist to develop new methods of preserving endangered ecosystems instead of consuming them. Apparently, before her transformation, she was an environmental restoration specialist." Kalen's expression brightened slightly. Lyra had been one of his most trusted lieutenants during their time as Devourers, but her return to her original nature had been particularly pronounced. She had spent the previous week creating a small garden in her quarters, nurturing plants from her homeworld that she had thought extinct for centuries. And Thane? Marcus's expression grew more serious. "He's struggling. The memories of what he was before are coming back, but they're painful. He was a healer, Kalen, a physician who specialized in treating children. The weight of what he became is almost crushing him." Thane's rehabilitation had been the most difficult of all the former Devourers. As his memories returned, he had been forced to confront the fact that hands which had once saved young lives had been used to consume them. Dr. Zephyra and her team were working around the clock to help him process the trauma, but there were days when it seemed like the guilt might destroy him more thoroughly than any weapon. "Perhaps I should speak with him," Kalen suggested. "We all carry the burden of what we became. Sometimes it helps to share that weight." Marcus nodded. "I think he'd appreciate that. Dr. Zephyra says the hardest part for all of you is learning to forgive yourselves for things you did while your true selves were buried." "And what about you, Marcus? Have you learned to forgive yourself for what you became?" It was a question that had been central to Marcus's own rehabilitation. The power of the Void Stone had made him capable of terrible things, and there were moments during the battle aboard the Devourer's ship when he had felt the same consuming hunger that had driven their species for centuries. "I'm working on it," Marcus admitted. "Some days are easier than others. But I've learned that forgiveness isn't something you achieve once and then you're done. It's something you have to choose every day." Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the facility's communication system. "All staff and patients, please report to the main assembly hall. We have some important news to share." Marcus and Kalen made their way to the assembly hall, where they found the other former Devourers gathered alongside the medical staff. Dr. Zephyr stood at the front of the room with Admiral Voss, who had arrived on Meridian Station that morning for a progress review. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Zephyr began. "As you know, we've been working together for 6 months now on what many people said was an impossible task. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Coalition Council has formally approved the expansion of this program." A murmur of excitement ran through the assembled crowd. The rehabilitation program had been operating under provisional approval, with its continuation dependent on demonstrable progress and the absence of security incidents. Admiral Voss stepped forward. The decision wasn't made lightly. There are still those within the Coalition who believe that the former Devourers represent an unacceptable security risk. However, the progress demonstrated here has convinced the Council that this approach offers hope for resolving conflicts that we previously thought could only end in mutual destruction. She turned to address the former Devourers directly. "Your willingness to confront what you became and work toward reclaiming what you once were has impressed even the most skeptical observers. But more importantly, you've shown that change is possible even for those who seemed lost beyond redemption." Lyra, the former environmental destroyer turned restoration specialist, raised one of her forearms. "Admiral, what does this expansion mean for those of our people who are still unchanged?" It was the question that had been weighing on everyone's minds. Intelligence reports suggested that there were other Devourer fleets scattered across the galaxy, still operating according to their old predatory patterns. The success of the rehabilitation program had raised the possibility of reaching out to them, but it also raised significant risks. We're developing protocols for contact and negotiation, Admiral Voss replied. The goal is to offer the same opportunity for rehabilitation that you've received here. But we won't be naive about the dangers involved. Some of your former kindred may not be interested in change. Thane, looking friendlier than the others but with more awareness in his eyes than he'd shown in months, spoke up in a voice barely above a whisper. They won't trust you. Why should they? From their perspective, you're the enemy who has somehow corrupted or weakened their strongest warriors. That's why any contact missions will include volunteers from this program, Dr. Zephyr explained. People like you who can speak to them from personal experience about what rehabilitation offers. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of confronting other Devourers, beings who might see him as a traitor or a corrupted enemy, was both terrifying and necessary. But there was another concern that he couldn't ignore. Admiral, I need to point out something that might complicate these contact missions. The Voidstone's power isn't diminished by the rehabilitation process. If anything, learning to control it has made me more dangerous than I was before. The same might be true for the others. Are we prepared for the possibility that trying to help other Devourers might require us to fight them? The question hung in the air like a challenge. It was the paradox at the heart of their entire enterprise. The power that had made them monstrous was also the power that allowed them to protect others from monsters. Admiral Voss looked at him steadily. Sergeant Shun, the Coalition has always believed that the purpose of strength is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. If you and the others are willing to use your abilities in service of that principle, then you'll have our full support. Kalen stood up, his imposing form drawing attention from everyone in the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the musical quality that had begun returning as his memories healed. Admiral, Dr. Zephyr, 6 months ago, we were predators who saw the galaxy as nothing more than feeding ground. Today, we're beings struggling to remember how to create instead of consume. Tomorrow, perhaps we can become something that we've never been before, protectors instead of destroyers. He looked around at his fellow former Devourers, then at the medical staff who had worked so tirelessly to help them heal. The path ahead won't be easy. Some of our people may refuse to change. Some may see us as enemies for choosing a different way. But for the first time in centuries, we have the chance to be something other than what our hunger made us. Dr. Zephyr smiled, her 4 eyes bright with the satisfaction of seeing her patients grow beyond what anyone had thought possible. The next phase of the program will involve smaller facilities on different worlds, each designed to work with specific aspects of rehabilitation. Kalen, we'd like you to help establish a music therapy center. Lyra, there's a planet whose ecosystem has been damaged by industrial accidents that could use your expertise. She turned to Marcus. And, Marcus, we'd like you to serve as a liaison between the rehabilitation centers and Coalition military forces. Your unique perspective and abilities would be invaluable in developing protocols for peaceful contact with other Devourer groups. Marcus nodded, accepting the responsibility despite his concerns about what it might require of him. I'll do whatever I can to help. As the assembly broke up and people began returning to their various duties, Marcus found himself walking with Dr. Zephyr toward the facility's observation deck. Through the large windows, they could see the stars that had once seemed cold and hostile, but now held the promise of worlds where healing was possible. Doctor, can I ask you something that's been bothering me? Of course, Marcus. When you first started talking to me in the medical bay, when I was still catatonic, you said that sometimes warriors who lose their way can find it again if someone keeps calling their name. How did you know that would work? Dr. Zephyr's laugh was warm and genuine. Honestly, I didn't. Kellyan's grandmother's stories were just that, stories. But sometimes the most important truth isn't scientific or medical. Sometimes it's simply the truth that someone cares enough to keep calling your name until you remember who you are. Marcus looked out at the stars and thought about the other devourers still out there, lost in their hunger and forgetting their names. Soon, he and the others would venture back into the darkness to call out to them, offering a chance to remember what they had once been and become something better. It was a dangerous mission, and success was far from guaranteed. But for the first time since Kepler 442b, Marcus Chun felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The Reaper had been a creature of death and consumption, but what he was becoming now was something else entirely. A voice calling names in the darkness, helping the lost find their way home. Behind them, the rehabilitation facility continued its work, a beacon of light in a galaxy that had too often been defined by conflict and predation. And somewhere in the medical bay, new patients were arriving, beings who had once been monsters learning to become themselves again, one recovered memory at a time.